Here's an important question. How may the mind be pacified? How may the mind be pacified? And what does that mean, to pacify the mind? The first time I heard that expression, I heard it from a story about the Buddha. And it said that all these people came to hear him, and there was all this chatter and hubbub going on. And then he came on and he started to speak, and everybody fell silent because their minds were pacified. Most people today, their minds are never actually pacified. The most pacification they might get would be watching TV. But that isn't really pacified because you're not conscious of it. Or you might take a drug, some of these pharmaceutical drugs, pacify the mind. But you're not really conscious of that either. When your mind is pacified, you experience peace. That's where the word comes from, pax, pacis, peace in the Latin. Pacify. Bring the mind to peace. Bring it to peace. So how does that happen? And because, as I say, most of the people, most of the time, are not at peace. They're talking to themselves. And make no mistake, talking to yourself isn't the same as being at peace. Having lovely thoughts, talking to yourself in a pleasant way, that isn't peace. Peace isn't about thinking. So when the mind is pacified, it means it's still. It means it's not moving. It means it's focused. It means it's absorbed. When you become focused into any one moment, or awake in any one moment, what you'll find is that in every moment, the substratum of that moment is always peace. There is nowhere where peace isn't. And when the mind is pacified, it is in union with that peace. It is non-different from that peace. So how to pacify the mind? All the suffering that comes in this life, without exception, comes through the portal of your internal dialogue, you chatting to yourself. A circumstance happens, but it takes your mind to characterize it before it turns into suffering. Even physical pain isn't suffering until it is characterized, evaluated, measured, etc. So, in order to feel peace, in order to feel the peace that is ever present, one must focus. There's basically two things you can do with your mind. Think, imagine, dream, and mostly internal chatter to yourself, or focus. When you focus, you wake up to this moment. And the more awake you get, the less easy it is for your thoughts to invade. The more times and the more time you spend focusing, the more you realize what peace is and how it is true that it's everywhere. And that peace isn't really made by circumstances. The end of war won't necessarily bring peace. Peace doesn't disappear when there's a war on. So the mind becomes pacified when you focus. Now, for me, my mind became pacified when I found my teacher and when I listened to him. And it was a different kind of listening. Before, I would listen to people talk, but I'd be having in my mind what I was going to respond, or how I would shoot them down, or how I would prove my rightness. But when the master speaks, that internal chattering stops, because one becomes absorbed in the listening. So listening to someone who has peace is one of the ways of becoming absorbed into peace and thereby pacifying the mind. And it's possible, you know, what is interesting, that when you speak to people who've sat with a master and gone into that listening and had their minds pacified for that period of time, and then you ask them, well, what did he say? You were listening to him for an hour, what did he say? And people can't remember. Very often people can remember 1-2 sound bites of what he said, but they can't remember. Because you're not looking for information. You're looking just to listen in order to pacify the mind so that you can feel what is underneath all of that, which is this wonderful peace and presence. Peace is alive. Peace is presence. Peace is unfathomable. But the question is how to pacify the mind. So, on the lowest level, watch TV. The next level, occupy the mind by doing something like reading. And the next level, or chanting. But the next level is not to do anything with it except listen. You're hearing all the time, but you're not listening all the time. You're looking all the time, but you're not seeing all the time. So when you focus, you come into peace. Peace isn't in the shallow part of us. To have our mind pacified means to go behind the mind, to go to what is prior to the thinker. And there are all kinds of well-tried methods for doing that. And once you find peace, it can stay with you. And it becomes easier and easier to feel. Obviously, the great masters and saints have told us that the way to experience peace is basically to meditate. So you don't just focus, you focus within. And the mind becomes pacified. If you let the mind run wild, it'll lead you a merry dance through this life and leave you thinking that there's something wrong. So you have to get control of your mind. At least sometimes. There has to be a moment in each day where you are focusing out of thought, where you're not interested in that thing that is constantly creating a narrative. Just letting things be as they are. And as you let go into that, your mind becomes increasingly pacified, and you feel more and more presence, until you kind of feel that the presence and the peace and the one who's feeling it are the same. That amazingly, when I go within, I find that I am full of peace. When I go within, I find that I am, which is full of peace. If your mind has never been pacified, the chances are that your experience of joy and happiness and love is not very great. Because joy and happiness, the actual feeling of joy and happiness, that's the product of having the mind pacified. When the mind is talking and chattering and characterizing and evaluating and commentating, there's no space, there's no bandwidth for joy, for peace, for the feeling of life. For good mental health and for a happy life, you must pacify the mind. And people have been pacifying their minds for a long time, thousands of years. So there are some ways of doing that really work very well. Peace is not far away. The feeling of peace, peace of mind, pacifying the mind, peace of mind, peace with the past, peace of mind, the beautiful peace, the natural feeling of life. In the deep depths of the ocean, profound peace. In the far reaches of space, profound peace. Sitting in the sparkling sunshine, peace. If you need a purpose in your life, I would say the best purpose to start with is to find the peace, to get pacified.